Love to Hate, the podcast that asks the question, what do you love to hate?
You are a smelly pirate hooker.
Movies, television, music, books, nerd things, current events.
And I hate your ass face!
Do you love it?
No! No! Hell no! No!
Do you hate it?
Whoa! Oh yeah! Oh yeah! Yes! You stupid, ignorant son of a bitch, dumb bastard!
I fart in your general direction. Your mother was a hamster, and your father smelt of elderberries.
No more foreplay.
Love to Hate starts now. Hey everybody, I'm Brandon Luna.
And I'm Philip Pullman.
And welcome to Love to Hate, Episode 1.
Yay! It's like the maiden voyage.
Yeah, it's not a 2-hour tour, though. It's like a 30-minute tour.
Yeah, that's
that's
going to be good, trying to keep us to 30 minutes. But
Yeah.
I think that's better for the current format.
I think so, too. So the idea behind Love to Hate is just that. We're going to talk about subjects that you just kind of love to hate. You know, you kind of love them, you kind of hate them, you're kind of on the fence. Maybe you really hate it, but you love hating it. You know, that's kind of the idea.
That you get some sort of pleasure from the hatred.
Exactly.
Or that it feeds you and it gets you up out of bed in the morning. Just that inner turmoil in the stomach. You just wake up from the hatred.
Exactly, yeah. So this is going to be a super
revealing
negative,
way too much.
super negative podcast.
So I saw my shrink today, and that's exactly what we talked about.
Exactly.
No, I think that's the thing. You can have sports is a perfect example of it. People they love getting riled up over the dumbest stuff, and the simple answer is, well, if it drives you that crazy, turn it off.
Exactly.
But they don't. They want to feed on it.
Yep. Why do they do that to themselves?
Exactly.
Why? You know. But
exactly.
I think it's human nature to.
I think it's become a cottage industry. Mm-hmm. Certainly, if you look at news media, mm-hmm. that's pretty much what it is. It's become just one 24-hour rant cycle. That's kind of disguised as news.
Exactly. And that's the topic for today. So nice segue.
Thank you. It's almost like I was here for rehearsals.
Exactly, yeah. So news media is the topic of the day. And we're not really news media. We're media.
Yeah.
But this is more opinionated type.
Well, and it's such a great time to talk about the news media.
It is. It really is, yeah.
And I'll start out, blame Ted Turner.
Yeah.
It's all his fault.
Yeah, you know, it kind of is.
I mean, think about when you and I were, because we're the same age. When we were growing up, you got the newspaper, you had 30 minutes of network TV in the evening, mm-hmm. and then you had 30 minutes of local, then you wait till 10 o'clock for the local newscast. So that's an hour and a half. Then Ted Turner comes along, he's like, no, I want to do news 24 hours a day. Suddenly they get to the point of we're repeating the same thing over and over. Mm-hmm. So they took the editorial portion of the news, and that's become the show. Fox, CNN, all these shows, they're nothing but extended editorials. There's very little just straight news. It's mostly people giving their opinion on it.
Yeah, and that's kind of my point is that when we were growing up in the 70s, I mean, the newspaper was canon. It was like that was your news. It was well thought out. It was written. They had, actual people getting facts and stuff, and it made sense. You read it, you had the whole story. You got the news on the daily news, and then you had the nightly news, and that was a truncated version of it, kind of just an overview so you can get the idea. But you went to the newspaper for the whole story,
right.
Or you went to Time magazine, or you went to something like that.
Time was where you were going to get the in-depth reporting.
Exactly, but you didn't. That was it. I mean, that was what it was. But now I think back then news was 90% news and 10% opinion /
right.
whatever. And now I think it's flip-flopped. It's like 10% news and 90% someone's idea of what the news is.
Well, and think of how it scares us now, because growing up, you never heard all these stories about, hey, so-and-so was abducted, or there was this heinous crime that happened, because you had 30 minutes to fit that in. So it's like, okay, we're going to talk about war, we're going to talk about politics, mm-hmm. maybe a feel-good story, but you didn't have just this endless day to fill stuff. So now it's, oh, wait, some kid got kidnapped? We are going to run this, and we're going to bring in people and child psychologists and everybody mm-hmm. to fill this up. So now all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, there's like a kid kidnapped every day.
Yeah.
And the rates don't even show that. It's odd, because to watch the news, you'd never know. We're actually safer than we've ever been, and there's actually less crime.
Yeah.
because if you watch the news, the sky's falling.
Exactly. And that's always the way it is now. I mean, it's just there's so much of it that's mostly about opinion and, ideas and concepts of this expert says this about this and that expert says this. But when you look at the hardcore facts, they're really not there anymore. And back in the day, in the 70s and the 80s or whatever, when you were looking at reading newspapers and doing that thing, if you had any kind of retraction, it was in the newspaper. That was part of what you did. You sat down, you read the newspaper, you got your fingers all inky, and you read about the retractions and went, okay, that's good to know, because it was still something that was valid. Now, when you have a retraction, it's 2-3 days later. No one cares. They've moved on to a different story. The story in your mind is the original first story that came out, whether or not that's true or not.
Well, and now, because it's all under that editorial and opinion, you can go off and you don't have to state facts. It's like, no, that's just how I feel. Mm-hmm. But yet somebody watching it as news is like, oh, yeah, this candidate is that way or that or this way. And they start using that to filter. And think of how it shapes elections, because when somebody's saying, well, technically this candidate's already dead, their campaign can't go any further. Well, how's that affect the people who are going to go out and vote for him, who maybe, would have put him over the top, but now it's like, well, why am I going to waste my vote? According to the TV, that candidate's already lost.
Yeah.
So it shapes that. And you think about it. When did TV start really shaping presidential elections? Well, the first time you had that televised debate. Mm-hmm. Nixon Kennedy.
Yep.
And everybody's like, wow, he just looks like a shady used car salesman who's been out in the lot too long on a Sunday.
Yep. He's sweating bullets.
Yes.
He's just, not what you would see as quote unquote presidential. Yeah.
Didn't matter what words came out of his mouth.
Yep.
He was doomed.
Yep, exactly. And you look at the current situation that we're in with Kasich, probably the most qualified guy for the job, really.
I would agree.
Because of his presence, because of everything else that's going on, this circus that we literally have in front of us, he gets lost. So
he's not designed for the current debate system.
No,
I don't think Ben Carson was either.
No, I don't think so.
I think he's. I don't think he's an idiot. I think he said some stuff that sounds pretty stupid, but I don't think he's the type of guy who's up there to give a 3-minute and just do this back and forth. He's old school debate. He's high school debate team debate. Mm-hmm. I will now take the next 5 minutes to explain my. It's like, nope, sorry, you got 30 seconds.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, what? Wait, I was getting warmed up. He didn't do well.
Yep.
In that format, and so now it's just a matter of it's out there, exchange insults and throw some mud at the other guy.
Yeah.
Did you see Cruz announce that Fiorina is going to be his? To me, that I cannot think of an example. That's like the team that lost the Super Bowl saying we're going to Disneyland. It's like that's
right.
It's fantastic. So it just doesn't matter.
Yeah, no, it doesn't. It doesn't. Yeah, it's crazy to me. I mean, this stemmed out of that conversation we had last week where I'm big on Instagram. I like to do the Instagram thing and the Instagram and the Facebook because we're older guys. And I just had that moment where I was reading the paper and I put it down. My fingers were inky, and I'm like, yeah, this is what it used to be. This was my. I still read the paper on a daily basis when I'm in the hotels and stuff.
Over there, you can't. Well, the garbage can's pretty full.
Yeah.
But that's full of newspapers.
But
my
even
daily
then,
paper that I've got to hold it and read it and
the tactile feel of it and changing the pages and knowing that you're done and you've read everything. But unfortunately, the paper that I get to read at the hotel is the USA Today, which is another bastardized version of news, basically.
The McPaper. I actually do. I do have a buddy who works at USA Today.
Do you really?
But and they just went through some massive cuts. But when you think about it, they're a product of the times.
Yeah, very much.
Because they're not. Somebody doesn't want to sit and go into it. So they're like, okay, hit the highlights. The Dallas Morning News tried that 4 years ago or something. I forget what they called it, but it was like the grab or something like that. Mm-hmm. Just get the highlights. It even put in newer, hipper comic strips.
Oh, yeah.
But it was in a tabloid style, so the kids would pick it up and be like, "Ooh, let me just get these little blurbs," because they don't want to sit and read the full thing. And that's the USA Today, the McPaper. It's okay, nothing in depth, but it's just I will now know everything about everything in a snapshot.
Exactly. Yeah, and there's no middle ground. It's like you have that, or you have Wall Street Journal, where you'll fall asleep on the toilet if you do. Basically that's what you have now. I really still enjoy reading the smaller publications. In Dallas, we have what's that one? Dallas Observer,
Right.
Because they get real in depth in stories that you don't necessarily hear in the Dallas Morning News, and
like the morning news, the Observer does not hide its bias.
exactly.
You know, they're just like, okay, here's kind of what side of the fence we fall on. Here's our point of view on it, but they can still do some good reporting.
Yeah, exactly.
We had that in Kansas City. It was called the Pitch Weekly. I think it was owned at one point by the same company. But it was kind of cool because it was like, okay, here's somebody else who gets to state their opinion, put out a story that's not necessarily going to make the big newspaper.
Yeah. And, to be fair, newspapers back in the day did have the blurbs as well. It was the Associated Press. They always had the Associated Press parts that were just like little blurbs of news, like little snippets of, like, here's something from the Associated Press.
But you wouldn't get that for the major stories.
Yeah, exactly.
The major stories was, you start, it was above the fold, front page, then you go inside, and then maybe it's a page.
Exactly.
You don't get much of that in USA Today. That said, I love getting it when I'm in hotels because it's like, okay, I can just kind of stay up to date, but I love getting the local paper from whatever city I'm in.
But yeah, I do when I can, but a lot of them are so badly written now it's hard to even get through them. So many misspellings and bad grammar. It's like, wow.
Yeah, I've come across that, and so I'm like, wait, that doesn't say what you think it says.
Exactly. And Associated Press, which kills me. I read this the other day on some news story, and I'm like, okay, Associated Press just cited TMZ for news. I'm like, when the hell was TMZ ever news?
What was it? Prince dying.
Yeah.
So now the show's dated. But TMZ was quoted by Fox News, by several other people, or other news networks.
That annoyed the living hell out of me.
But okay, but even on the local news and sometimes national, CNN and Fox, they're like, here's what our Twitter followers have to say. Really? Yeah. So I get to hear what Chuck in Scuff Boot, Oklahoma has to say on this? Thank God that Chuck is there to just shine a light on this subject, because I don't know where to be.
In 150 characters.
Yeah. How desperate are you that you've got to sit there, and in order to get people to watch or listen, you've got to throw in their opinion too. It used to be, no, David Brinkley doesn't need your opinion.
Yep.
But now it's okay, I'll watch because everybody has a voice, which is, I don't know. So we're sitting here doing a podcast where we have a voice, but at the same time, it's like, you know what? When I watch the news, I'd rather hear their voice.
Exactly. Yeah.
I don't need to get the whole peanut gallery.
Yeah, but the peanut gallery wants their 15 seconds of fame too. So.
Well, yeah. Now the did you watch any of the presidential debates?
Yeah.
So now they're taking questions from Facebook.
I know.
And so here's your Facebook profile pic, and dear Mr. Trump, like, why?
Yeah.
That was like when MTV did the presidential town hall or whatever, and you got the infamous boxers or briefs question. It's like, yeah, there's a reason some people just shouldn't be allowed to ask questions.
Yeah.
But that's what we're getting to. It's got to feel inclusive, or we don't,
Well, that's the thing, is now the way news media is, there's really no filter for it. It's like everything comes at such a rapid pace between Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and everything else, and all these, I can't even count how many different news media sources there are just on the internet alone.
Right.
That all that stuff's coming at you at rapid pace. They have to pick and choose what they think applies to that story, apply it to that story, whether or not it's true or not, and it at that point becomes the story. And that really freaking annoys me. That whole thing with Prince. I mean, look at Prince. This is a guy that did a lot with his life. He's leaving a really good legacy of music and passion and all these things that he did. But now it's possibly tainted by this TMZ story because that's what it was. And even if it comes out being not true, there's still going to be a whole bunch of people that go, yeah, he overdosed on Percocet or whatever, Well,
we're conditioned to that, though. So as soon as he died, anytime a celebrity of any stature dies, like, oh, we automatically assume, that they died on the toilet like Elvis.
Yeah, but
and it could just be, no, they were just.
But back in those days, it was what their press secretary, whoever was, said,
sure,
he passed away in his sleep. That's it. That was the story. No one dug into it and made it this dirty, awful thing until probably, when was that? The 80s? I guess
yeah.
Yeah.
I would say probably the 80s, after Elvis, and then
Watergate and all that crap.
Well, and you know what? I think after Watergate, that's when the media became, they started digging more, I think, and you pulled the veil off of things. Whereas before, you never talked about Kennedy and his ladies.
His transgressions.
Yes, we don't talk about that. He's the president. After Nixon, he lowered the office to the point where it was something you could discuss. Then in the 90s, I think, is when it really became contentious, and I would point to Limbaugh as that. And I'll say he's a hell of a broadcaster, because to do what he does every day for 4 hours with nobody in the studio, as a broadcaster, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
But I think he really brought in some of that vitriol that you didn't always see, and that's when it became, okay, this side good, this side bad. And it just, that amped up in the 90s. Then you started getting the networks and just, the conservatives and the liberals and just, they're this. And you got more mudslinging at that point. I mean, it used to be Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan would have a beer after they disagreed because it was all civil. It was like, okay, look, you feel this way, I feel that way. But now you got that great, I got nothing for this, but you got Hank Williams Jr., calling out the Speaker of the House because he played golf with Obama.
Yeah.
And calling him a traitor and just, who cares? He's the Speaker of the House. Shouldn't he get along with the president regardless of views? They played golf.
Yeah.
And then that became a whole news cycle. And the guy ends up, I wouldn't say losing his job, but I mean, he doesn't have to rewrite that song every season now.
Yep. I got a name for you.
What's that?
Gary Hart.
Oh, yeah.
Remember that one?
Donna Rice.
Wow. That was the first time I remember
that's
in
true.
my time, media really going after something and tearing into it. And that was kind of when the mudslinging started pretty hardcore, and it became kind of the norm at that part. And now it's almost expected. It's like you are waiting for the stories to come out for who did what with who, and all these things just pop. Freaking Trump is, the master of that, just trying to dig shit up.
And how have they not dug any shit up on Trump? Because I just look at the guy, it's like, okay, there's some skeletons.
Yeah, it's all under his hairpiece.
It's got to be.
I don't know.
It's got to be.
Yeah.
Well, and you had, God, it was like you had a trio. You had Donna Rice, the chick from the PTL Club who started dating Sam Kinison, Jessica Hahn, and then Fawn Hall, Oliver North's secretary or whatever.
The whole Tammy Baker thing too.
Yeah. And so you had that whole. All of a sudden, here's like these three women, very high profile, in these scandals. But yeah, they really went after Hart, which was odd because before affairs were never something that they really. Yeah, chased after.
It was off topic. It was like, let's keep to the subject matter. Let's keep to the what we're talking about in this particular political race. Family, all that stuff was off limits. And now it's everybody's.
Now it's fair game. You can sit there and talk about so and so's kid did this. How does that reflect on somebody who wants to run for president?
Yeah,
it's like, well, you ever have kids? I mean, God forbid that you're held responsible for every word that comes out of your kid's mouth. But that's how they look at it. It's like, well, then your kid should be perfect too, because if I'm electing you, you should be, perfect as president, which is just stupid. It's not going to happen.
I was in a hotel ironing, and I always watch news, and I do that. And I was flipping back and forth, and they had the thing on with Trump and his family. What is this bullcrap? I mean, when did that start becoming a thing where they get them and their families on and talk about
the potential first family?
Oh gosh, did you see that at all? Did you see that stuff? It's just such a waste of time. I didn't get it at all.
I don't understand it. They talk about what kind of first lady do you want? It's like, hey, okay, I don't think everybody's going to be the next Eleanor Roosevelt, but like you said, when did that start being a consideration? What type of first family will we have? It's like, how about the guy just has a good policy I agree with and will actually do it?
Yeah.
Which they most likely don't.
Exactly. Most of them don't, yeah.
No. So see, now we're editorializing.
Exactly, yeah.
But think about it, even if you read the newspaper now, adjectives have crept in to the description. So it's like, here's a slight bias that you're starting to get. It's the difference between saying, in Congress, there was a discussion among senators regarding this, or you say the word heated discussion. Well, now all of a sudden, what was going on? Maybe it paints a different picture of it,
Yeah.
and makes it sound like there was more animosity when maybe there wasn't. So those, just a few words here or there, it really kind of shapes the picture that we get.
What do you blame that on? Do you blame that on the editors, or do you blame that on the Times, or what is that?
Both.
Yeah.
Because I think it's a way to get people to read. Because honestly, if I was to just give you a straight news story with nothing but facts and do the Jack Webb Joe Friday version of it, it's kind of boring. It's like, well, I'm just basically reading a report here. It's very plain. It's
like a stereo manual. Yeah.
It pretty much is. But when you start adding in the description and things like that, then it starts to take shape, and you start to feel like you're in the story and start to understand it, but it's also kind of shaping how you view it, as opposed to letting you decide for yourself. And I hear people say that regarding, because what Fox News is thinking, we report, you decide. But you'll have people be like, oh, CNN, that's the communist news network, or NPR is the national propaganda network, or something like that. And because they disagree, with their bias, they report it this way. Well, maybe listen to both. Maybe take in more than one news source, and then use your brain and just kind of filter out and try to find that truth that lies in the middle. I don't agree with everything I hear on NPR, don't agree with everything I hear on Fox or CNN, but I kind of take it and hear this end and this end, and then I kind of just use some common sense and decide for myself.
Yeah, yeah.
Which is what you should do, instead of just taking it in, going, oh, yeah.
But that takes work, though, and we're in a society. We're in that society now where it's gimme now. I need everything right this minute. So you're asking someone to take an extra step in their brain and actually think. And I think
we're becoming a nation that we just want to not think and just follow.
Yeah.
Basically, there's a lot of people in this country that are ripe for a cult.
Right.
When you think of the Jim Jones people, we're just like, okay, yeah, I guess so.
And I think the
legalization
of marijuana is the gateway to that.
Well, certainly if you're walking around stoned, you would maybe be more susceptible.
Yeah, you're not going to give a crap what the hell the government's
doing.
No, just like,
okay, what did he say? I get. When did thinking become so freaking painful?
Right.
It's supposed to be, just I don't know if I'm using the word correctly, an autonomic response. It's something you should do. You don't think you're about breathing, you don't think about hand movements or anything like that, but suddenly it's going to pain you to engage your brain.
That's society we're in, man. It's all very.
God, we're that lazy.
We really are. I blame MTV on that. We've got.
You could, and the thing is, you got it on both sides.
Yeah,
because you got liberals who do it, and you got conservatives who do it, where they're just going to listen to whatever the talking head says and go, yeah. That's exactly the truth, and it's not that. The truth is never that simple.
Yeah,
but we want to make it that way. And what's funny is when you find somebody, seeing as how we spend so much time in cigar shops, you find somebody who wants to sit there and make their political point, and you realize they had to have heard that on the news, because all they've done is just regurgitate several talking points.
Yep.
But they haven't really tackled anything. It's just all these little points that sound really good.
Yeah. And if you challenge them on any point, they're not going to have anything to back it up with. Oh, well, that's just conjecture.
Exactly. Or they'll sit there and they'll call you a name. Because that's the other thing you can do to diffuse an argument. If you try to have, and again, both sides do it. If you try to have a logical argument on, say, the discussion of restrooms, because that's a big discussion right now.
It is, yeah.
And if you try to even play devil's advocate, or just have a logical discussion and maybe approach it from all angles, if somebody doesn't like your answer, you pin them on something. Well, you're just nothing but a commie liberal. Okay, so wait, I can't come back from that. Right. It's like, so what you've done is by labeling me. You've said that anything else that comes out of my mouth is not valid.
Yep.
So it's like, how can you? You can't have a discussion with that person. Anytime you label somebody, well, you're just a peon. You're just, you what do you make? You make $7 an hour.
Proletarian slob.
Yeah. So all of a sudden, I can't have an opinion on taxes or anything like that because I'm a proletariat slob. Mm-hmm. So not smart enough to be in your conversation. You've now won by default. Mm-hmm. We don't like that. We don't want to be challenged, and I love that. I love the discussion, and debate, because it's like maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah.
If I am, wow.
Yeah.
Now you've given me a new way of thinking about it, or I come back to the decision of, you know what? I'm really going to stand by how I feel on this issue. I don't take it personally, like, wow, I was wrong. My faith in myself is shaken.
Yeah. When was the last time that's happened, though? When was the last time a news story or something changed your mind on a subject?
I probably, this has been years now, and oddly enough, it was in the newspaper. There was an article in the Dallas Morning News about a study done in Britain. So when I talk to people about this, they immediately threw it out because they're like, well, it was done in Britain.
Right.
But it was regarding drugs and what the most harmful drugs were to society, and they based it on financially, societally, and as far as addiction goes. And at the top of the list was like meth, coke. Number 3 was alcohol. Mm-hmm. At the very bottom of the list was pot.
Yeah.
And it made me wonder, is like, because I've always been one of those guys who, just say no. I've never smoked pot. Just never have. Nothing about it appeals. And that got me to think, like, wait a minute. That's kind of interesting. And then some of the police officers I've met, and they've made statements of, I would much rather arrest a pothead than a drunk.
Yeah. Because
they said, the drunk, I don't know. He could be just like, oh, yeah, officer, I'll go with you. Okay, put the cuffs on. 2 seconds later, he's trying to grab the cop's gun.
Yeah.
You just never know. Mm-hmm. Whereas they're like, the stoner, he's just okay.
Yep.
And so that really got me to think, like, maybe I need to look into this more and not just be, no, I think legalizing is wrong.
And now you're a big fat pothead.
No, but Kevin Smith is.
Yeah, he is. And how he's changed since that.
Not as funny. I don't think he's as funny.
No,
I think he's because he's too stoned.
He is. Yeah. He even says it all the time. If you ever listen to his podcast, like he'll stop midstream and I'm too stoned to finish that conversation. I'm like, wow, come on, man.
Yeah, because he was always great at having extended dialogue and conversation, and now it's just like he starts to lose it and he repeats himself too much.
He's apologizing a lot more now because he says stupid stoner things and doesn't think.
I blame Seth Rogen.
Yeah. Yeah, probably true. True.
Yeah, he said Seth Rogen's the one who turned him on to it.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I don't like Seth Rogen.
Yeah.
But
that's awesome.
I would say that was probably one time that I can remember. Okay, maybe I need to examine how I look at this. Or what's interesting in some of the things I've heard from people who are Republican, which you would identify as conservative, and yet they look back at the Clinton presidency, and all of a sudden, it wasn't so bad in the 90s.
Right.
Well, he was a whoremonger and this and that. But,
he did a bunch of things right.
And then you hear, there was a stat I read that actually government spending was lower under Clinton than it was Bush. Mm-hmm. And so it's one of those where it's like, okay, objectively, you got to look at it. Maybe you didn't like the guy as much as Bush or agree with him, but you can't not look at that and recognize that as a fact.
Yeah, and I've had that conversation with several people when we talk about presidents and stuff, and I go back and look and say, what happened if Clinton didn't get caught? What happened if that story never came out? What would you think about his presidency at that point? Whoa, that's totally not. Yeah, it's part of the discussion. I mean, if news media wasn't digging that much, if they weren't doing this thing that they do now, which is to deconstruct everything and try and demonize it, then his presidency would be a hell of a lot better remembered, Right.
Well, I mean, think of Kennedy.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, oh my God, they've killed the president. And it didn't matter if you voted for Kennedy or not. They shot your president. And you know damn good and well that if there was a presidential assassination now, anytime going forward, some jackass would sit there and go, well, he wasn't my president. Well, it would not be, hey, man, somebody just gave it to the country up the backside, mm-hmm. and you need to be pissed about this.
Yeah. And he would get that little blurb, his little Twitter blurb on the news.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But at the time, would they have remembered Kennedy different if they were like, which Hollywood starlet was in the White House last night?
Right.
Talking about his assassination, did his mob ties have anything? They would have just viewed him and his legacy differently. Plus, think of it. You have the Bay of Pigs happen now. And you've got somebody on the air going, well, maybe if he wasn't so busy nailing Marilyn, he'd have time to focus on...
Yep.
That would be it.
Yep.
And, granted, if you are having an affair, that can take up a lot of your time, so maybe you're not focusing on the country's needs, but it wasn't an issue.
Yeah, and pretty damn awesome that it was Marilyn Monroe, so kudos to him.
Yeah, that's... poor Joe DiMaggio, though.
Right.
Yeah. Well, it's not like he was the first guy or the 100th to sleep with Marilyn Monroe. I mean, the rat, yeah. I'd have been more impressed if it was Ava Gardner.
Well, yeah.
But then Frank would have killed him.
Well, yeah.
Frank would have just been like,
That would have been the mob ties right there, yeah. That would have been it.
That's my personal theory. I don't think it's a conspiracy.
Nailed Ava Gardner and you didn't know?
No,
I heard about it?
It's not like, so... The Russians took a guy who was the same build as Oswald, and then they gave him facial surgery. And then they trained him to talk English just like... I don't go in for that. I think it's a simple matter of the mob helped him win Virginia and Illinois by getting Chicago. And then you get elected, and your brother, who's Attorney General, says we're going after the mob. The mob remembers those things, and those are the two who were shot.
Yeah. That's good.
So I think to me it's not a stretch to think probably had something to do with that.
Yeah, interesting.
I watched The Sopranos. Did you ever watch what was that Showtime show with Jeff Daniels, the Aaron Sorkin show, News?
I know what you're talking about. But
something. I can't even remember the name of it.
See it. I heard it was good though.
You know what? Here's the thing. I'm a huge fan of Sports Night. Love that show.
Yeah, Sports Night was great.
And watching the first 3 episodes, I'm like,
The Newsroom? Was it
The Newsroom?
Yeah.
It was almost like the same plot points, the same relationships that you had in Sports Night.
Interesting. Okay.
And I'm not. Again, I'll watch a show if it's well written. I don't have to agree with it 100% just because it's entertainment. But that one was one where it definitely felt like, okay, I'm getting hit over the head.
Oh, yeah.
And that I try to stay away from. It's like, I get it. You're going to have an opinion here or there. But when it's like, I'm going to force this, it's like, okay, now you're kind of taking me out of it.
Yeah, but that's what all news media is now, though. I mean, you watch CNN and it's like,
that's
20 minutes of the news, and then you got all the opinion shows afterwards where they just pound your head over the... And they got hot chicks talking about it, so you watch it because there's hot chicks.
And what... Okay, they are attractive, but it does, for me as a viewer, kind of bring into question, why are you sitting there? Is it because you got legs, or is it because you can really add something to this? And God help me, it's like, really? So the only attorney you could find to answer this is the hot one?
Right. Yeah,
like, come on.
You watch broadcast news, and it makes you wonder how much is going into their heads that they're spouting out. It's like just
absolutely.
It's a total puppet show. So
absolutely,
yeah.
It's funny, Joey, obviously, buddy of mine. I did a podcast with. Still, I guess will at some point maybe. Used to work at Fox News. Mm-hmm. And, Joe considers himself kind of just like an average New Yorker, not really, I guess in Texas he'd be considered liberal, but probably middle of the road type of guy. And no names, but, not everybody at Fox News is a Republican. And not all of them are straight.
Interesting. Yeah.
And yet, which to me is hilarious because I would love to sit down with somebody watching Fox News and go, you see that? That chick's a gay Democrat. It's just like, I want to see your head explode.
Right.
Just like telling somebody at CNN, it's like, that guy's actually a conservative Christian. He's actually a Republican. What would the viewership do? Would it just blow their minds?
Yeah. Who knows, man?
I don't know. It's only getting worse.
Yeah, for sure.
And it will only get worse by the time our kids are old enough, it's going to be Idiocracy.
It will be, yeah. And that's where we're heading.
Unfortunately,
really is. Yeah. Unfortunately.
It's a very prophetic movie.
Yeah, it is. It is. And, I had to sit my daughter down the other day because we had a little discussion about some news stories. And I'm like, where'd you hear that? Oh, at school. Everybody was talking about it. I'm like, okay, did you just believe what they said? Well, that's what everybody was saying. I'm like, okay, well, maybe do a little research on it before you start talking about it. Read this, read that. Let's see what the real story is. Oh, it just... That's the way it is now, though. Like I said, there's a degree of laziness in you're getting spoon-fed your information. It's not necessarily the right information. It's not coming the right way. There's omissions. There's opinions. There's all these other things besides the news. And it's really going to destroy a generation as far as their belief system and what people are telling you.
Yeah.
You can't trust the news media at this point.
I was walking out of a breakfast place, and I had my newspaper with me. And the gal ringing me up, I guess, felt the need to start making conversation. It's like I'm leaving. But she said, she goes, yeah. She goes, what do you think about all the election stuff? I'm like, well, it's certainly interesting. She goes, yeah. She goes, I was seeing some on that. She goes, what do you think of Sanders? I mean, from what I've seen, he seems like a nice guy. Fantastic. Go to the booth and vote for the guy who seems like a nice guy. You can't even name anybody else. Right. But from what you know, he seems like a nice guy. And maybe he is. That's not my point. It's that's the extent of what you know about the news. And God forbid, you're old enough to vote.
Yep.
And it's like you have no idea of issues. And if you decided you wanted to go do your civic duty, you'd go in and vote for the one guy whose name you've heard and who seems nice.
And probably straight ticket.
Yeah.
That's the other thing. I got to love that. When did that start?
It's
straight ticket, just to make it easy.
I'm just going to make this easy because I'm just, at some point, I swear, I'm going to bet the bank on this.
Okay.
At some point, you're going to have a picture of a donkey and a picture of an elephant, and all you got to do is punch one or the other.
Right.
It is going to get to that point where people are just that dumb, where it's like, oh, I'm voting for that one. That's the Republican.
The button's going to be right in the middle of the donkey's ass.
Well, why not? That's what politicians do to us anyway. Just,
Exactly.
here.
Yep.
Put the finger right there.
Yep.
Because that's what's going to happen.
All right. So we are not a fan of the news media right now.
Man, they serve a purpose. They really do, but we just can't sit there and just let it all come in.
Yeah.
We've got to have some filter in our brain that allows us to process it, and being informed is important.
It is. And if you just let the news media wash over you right now, you're going to drown.
Yeah.
In stupidity.
Yes. Yeah. You can't take it all as fact.
Nope.
They need to put something. It's like the end of an infomercial. The views expressed by Slap Chop are not necessarily those of this network.
Yeah, that really.
They need to put that up. Is like the following program is an editorial. Welcome to the O'Reilly Factor.
Exactly.
Or whatever the one Tim Matthews does, or
Yeah.
Chris Matthews, because that's all it is.
Exactly. Yeah. All right. So that's going to close out episode 1.
How do you feel about that?
Love to hate. About what?
First episode.
I feel good about it. That was a fun discussion. Yeah.
It was.
This is going to be fun. I can tell already.
I like it.
I'm going to like it. All right. So hopefully you guys visit us next time. We do have a Twitter feed now. And we just talked about Twitter. Yeah. Fucking Twitter.
I'm late to the show.
It's at love, the number 2, hate pod, P-O-D.
All right.
L-O-V-E, 2, H-A-T-E-P-O-D.
I'll put this on my Facebook page,
Yep.
too.
And we do actually have a Gmail, too. It's lovetohatepodcast@gmail.com.
Do we have Instagram?
No Instagram. No,
Yeah, there's no
Instagram. Yeah.
That seems kind of pointless.
Now, the love to hate on the Gmail is lovetothatepodcast@gmail.com. So if you want to contact us, if you have something you want us to discuss, just let us know. And if we like your idea, we'll bring it to the show, and we'll make sure to give you a little shout out. We'll put your opinions on Twitter on our show.
Yeah, and if we don't like your idea, we may talk about how stupid your idea is.
We might do that as well.
I'm going to be totally unfiltered. I'm kind of digging this.
I'm loving it. We'll see you next time.
Take care, kids.
Take care.